When I was in middle school, I shared a bedroom with my little sister. She slept in a bed, and I slept on a blanket pallet on the floor at the foot of her bed. There with a small dresser against the wall at the area of my feet. We had just gone to bed, and I was reading a comic with the red light from my alarm clock when my sister screamed, "What is that?" In that moment, I looked and saw, on the wall, directly above the small dresser, a brightly glowing green rectangular pattern of some kind. Lit the room. It was like alien writing. We came off our beds and were kind of thrown together against the closet doors on the opposite side of the room, screaming. Then, it was gone, and our folks were yelling at us. This was the early 80s. We didn't have any digital stuff, or even a lamp. There were heavy curtains over the windows, and woods out back with no light source. I don't know what the hell it was, but it made me more open-minded about the supernatural.
I know how sleep paralysis works, so I consider this a hallucination and not an interaction. But it was still very scary. In this sleep paralysis incident, I was in bed when I heard someone unlock my front door. My best friend had a key, and it wasn't unusual for him to drop by, so I figured it was him. I heard him walk across my apartment, enter my bedroom, and sit down at the head of my bed. At this point, I figured out it was not really my friend. But because this was sleep paralysis, I could not turn to look. This being started massaging my hands and whispering in a language that I did not understand. I kept trying to move around and see them, but was frozen. Then they leaned into my line of sight. Just a black silhouette like the Grim Reaper. A shadow person. I had never heard of the shadow person phenomenon. But when I described this experience to my boyfriend, he told me everything he had heard on Coast to Coast about them.
This happened several years ago. I had just cleaned my kitchen and was heading into the living room to sit down and watch some TV. Shortly after watching TV, I heard the unmistakable sound of an empty soda can pinging as it hit my linoleum floor in my kitchen. I got up and there was the can right there in the middle of the floor. I froze because when I left the kitchen, originally, the can had been rinsed out and pushed against the wall, opposite end of my counter. I looked down at the can, then looked back at the wall, then back down at the can and back to the wall, knowing other strange things that has happened in my apartment. On multiple occasions, I immediately was like, nope, turning around and leaving the kitchen. A couple hours later, when I finally got the courage to go back in and pick up the can to throw away, it was gone. I was like, where the hell did it go? It's important to know that I live on my own, so there's nobody that could have possibly picked it up instead. Knowing that it was there a couple of hours prior sent me on a mission to find it, and to prove to myself that I was wrong. I looked everywhere possible, but it was nowhere. I have countless stories for days that I could share as well. I will say this though, with all the other situations that has happened, I always try my best to ignore whatever happened and not feed into it because I know it feeds off of fear. So I figured the less attention I give for reaction, the better it will be.
My dad's story, not mine. Early 1980s. He is working a summer job at Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming. One day he and his friend Mark hiked up to the top of one of the mountains. They set up their tent inside an Indian pit, a man-made hole dug out by Native Americans hundreds of years ago. The Indian pits were either used as hunting blinds or spots where young braves came to for their vision quest. Late in the night, my dad wakes up and has to use the bathroom. Camera 1. He crawled out of the tent, out of the pit, and went walking a respectable distance away from the tent. Suddenly, he felt a hand on his shoulder pull him backwards. My dad calls out, "Hey Mark, what are you doing?" He turns around, turns on his flashlight, and there is nobody there. He shines the light at his feet and discovers that his next couple steps would have taken him directly over a steep cliff. He did his business and hurried back to the tent. The next morning, the two friends are waking up, and his buddy says to him, "I know this sounds crazy, but I woke up in the middle of the night and I swear to you, there was an Indian man standing outside our tent. Whatever really happened that night, my dad is alive. He met my mom in Yellowstone, and here I am writing this story to you today."
I used to work at a museum that was once a functional prison. Throughout my 8+ years working there, I have been pushed, slapped, bit, dragged and punched by unseen entities. I always had problems when I would go to lock up certain buildings at night because you never knew what you would see coming around a corner. I went into the cell house once to turn off the lights, rounded the doorway to see a full-bodied apparition standing there in an inmate's uniform. A split second later, he vanished into thin air. There was a pretty notorious inmate who was involved in one of the riots, and his spirit would follow me around the grounds. One night I was with a paranormal group, And we went into an area that we don't let the public visit because it's in disrepair. And we were screamed at to leave, and something snarled at me. It was not uncommon for me or one of my co-workers to have shadow people follow us around, and we would even have some poor visitors chased out of certain buildings like maximum security by such entities.
Whenever I get sick, I get the same nightmare over and over. Background story. My room has a bed with a metal bed frame, and I'm a very messy person. Anyway, so when I get a cold or the flu, I get the same dream of a scary lady who seems to be in her 30s, with very tangled black hair, fungus-covered skin, and glowing silver eyes sitting on my bed frame. I can't move, and she's just sitting and watching me for hours. She never moves, just sits there. Then towards the end, she becomes me, and I'm looking down at myself. Well, one time I was extremely sick, and all I could really do was sleep. So, one of the times I went to sleep, I woke up in the dream or in real life. I really don't know. And a gargoyle was sitting on my chest holding me down to where I could only use my eyes to look around. I was forced to look at my closet, which was very messy, when I went to sleep, and it was exactly how I left it. The socks on the floor were exactly where I left them. The only difference was there was a 7 feet tall demon-like thing in my closet with yellow eyes, big claws, red wings with spikes, and a dragon-like head. It walked closer and closer to me until I woke up screaming. I told my dad about this days later, and he said he had the same dream years ago. It was creepy because we both described the demon the same way, and my mom confirmed that this was exactly how he described the demon years ago. The only difference was that in his dream, the demon tried to drag him underground.